So folks, thank you very much for coming today. Once again, I'm Ed Pollack. I'm a member of the Green Sanctuary Education Committee. My colleague, church member Diane Alexander. Yeah, we'll be together. We'll be presenting this this workshop to you. This is the 6th and final workshop in this Green Sanctuary Green Living series. Believe it or not, the first one was way back either September or October of last year. And now this is the 6th workshop. We've previously, how many of you have attended at least one other of our previous? Fantastic. You guys are fantastic. Thanks so much. Our previous workshops, as you know, we started out talking about carbon footprints and carbon offsets and how you can reduce your carbon footprint. Talk about transportation, how our transportation choices affect our carbon footprints. We talked about food and all of our different food choices, and once again, how it affects our carbon footprints. We had a whole workshop on the story of stuff, which was all geared toward reducing the amount of waste that we generate each week and throw into the garbage bin. And then last month we had a workshop on home energy and how we can use less of energy in our homes. Today, we move outside, which is only fitting in a green living workshop series, right? Today, in our last workshop, we move outside in what we're calling our backyard habitats workshop. And, you know, Kermit the Frog, I guess, you know, sang the song, "It's not easy being green." I seem to remember that back in the day. Well, I love Kermit the Frog. I love frogs, but I'm here to tell you it is easy to be green. And actually, you say it's fun. It's also really gratifying to be green as well. And that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. And, you know, the theme of today's sermon was, of course, transformation. I was paying close attention to that because so much of what we heard in the sermon was really spoke to this workshop and to these green workshops in general. We've tried to provide information on how we can all transform our relationship with planet Earth. And, you know, all of these choices are made at the individual level, but collectively, when, you know, you have a few or dozens or hundreds of people making these choices to transform that relationship, then it becomes meaningful. And then you really have an impact. So don't get frustrated and say, oh, the problems are so large, I can't make a difference. Well, you can. And today we're going to give you even more examples in how you, in your relationship with planet Earth, right on your yards. So if we could have our first slide, please, Katie. Yes. I think the arrows will, the right arrow will. There you go. Okay. Well, that's fun. Is it PowerPoint? Oh gosh. This is PowerPoint? Yeah, this is a PowerPoint. Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's not up there. Oh, that's mine. Yeah, mine's the Healing Gardens. Really looks like it.
When? All summer?
Well, no, not all. Well,
as you have perennials.
That was not in this part of the country, so that's just like
no fair.
Well, it's just a healing garden. You know,
well, if they're perennials, they're not conserving.
Yeah. We do a slideshow on the top.
Yeah, slide. Yeah, right. He was saying
slide in the middle, and then from the beginning on the left.
I'm going to make it relate to this part.
If you try to dance it, does it?
Yeah, it's no, it's not sharing the sun.
But at least we
keep talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm substituting for Dan, and I appreciate everyone's.
Yes, Katie. We also pray for Katie to get us through the technical.
Carol said she could help you if you need help. She's
You were fine with where you were flash, though.
Yeah.
It's all good, now I just need to go reshare this screen again.
Well, Katie's a whiz at this.
I think we're good now. I think we're better than we were before.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what I'm going to be talking to you today about are these principles of green landscaping that we can all use on our yards. We're going to talk about reducing our lawn area, the importance of how we view and use our grass clippings, the importance of just rejecting pesticides on our properties, rejecting synthetic fertilizers and instead using compost. We'll talk about feeding the soil and not the plant and why that's so important. We're actually going to talk about some plants that we think of as weeds, but why they're actually beneficial, why it's important to minimize water use on our properties, and finally, we're going to have a big section on pollinator gardens. Next slide, please. So let's start talking about grass clippings. Most or many people either mow their lawn or they have a landscaping service mow the lawn, and they have a bag either at the back of the lawnmower or something to catch the grass clippings as the lawn is cut. And then they have to they remove that from the yard. Either it's put out in a bag for the town to pick up, or maybe they dump it in the back. But it's viewed kind of as a waste. But instead, we need to think of grass clippings as a resource, a fertilizer resource to be utilized on our lawns. In order to do this, you need to have use what's called a mulching mower. Mulching actually is kind of a misnomer. It's more of a composting mower in that the blade of a mulching mower shreds the grass clippings into very fine particles, very fine pieces. And then it just places it down, as long as you don't have a bag at the back, it places it right down onto the lawn. It's very fine grass pieces. Those shredded grass clippings then slowly decompose right in place, as compost does, and they represent a fertilizer. They're the fertilizer that the grass will then utilize. So you're essentially fertilizing your lawn every time that you're using this mulching mower. On our lawn, we use that mulching mower in the fall as well, and we just mulch right in place. Any leaves that have fallen, and again, those leaves, rather than something that you've got to break up and pull, remove from your yard, it's actually a resource, as it's mulch that's going. Sorry, it's compost eventually that will feed your lawn. Next, please. So. This is not what I mean by green living. Yeah, it's green, it's real green, but this is not the kind of green living we're talking about. It's maintaining this type of lawn is both, it's expensive because, as I'll point out, it takes a lot of chemical inputs, and it's really ecologically damaging. Next slide, please. So, when you look at the natural world, you see that nature does not do monoculture. The monoculture is a plant community where there's just one plant, such as that green lawn that we just looked at. But that doesn't occur in nature. I don't know of any natural habitat that's a monoculture. Instead, plant communities are extremely diverse. And in this is a meadow that I walked past in Vermont last year. And there were literally dozens and dozens of different plants, ferns, grasses, sedges, mosses, and these flowering plants. That's the natural way of doing things, not monoculture, but polyculture. And this type of plant community is much more resilient than a monoculture, like that green lawn that I just showed you, because when a community is made of just one type of plant, let's say a plant disease moves in or an insect pest moves in, and all of the plants have the same genetic makeup, they're all going to be susceptible to that pest, the introduced pest. Whereas a diverse plant community is going to be resilient because it's made up of so many different types of plants. So you don't find monocultures in nature, you just don't. But that green grass lawn is a monoculture. It's out of touch with nature. Next slide, please. So, in order to maintain a monoculture grass lawn, you have to introduce significant chemical inputs. That would be in form of fertilizers and pesticides. That's the only way to keep that green grass lawn. So that's expensive, but it also has ecological consequences. Next slide, please.
Like you mentioned earlier, you use compost. You don't have to use chemicals.
Exactly. I'll have a slide in just a second about compost. That's the choice that we have, in maintaining a lawn. You have to feed it, but the question is, how do you feed it? Okay. So the pesticides that have to be applied to maintain that unnatural lawn, they come with a cost. These are poisons, whether they're herbicides killing plants, or fungicides killing fungi, rodenticides killing small animals. They are they're poisons that are placed on our yard, and they're going to kill all of the biota, the organisms that live in the soil, the worms, fungi, the bacteria, all of which are important components of the soil. And I just, even just driving to this church today, I saw a half dozen of these yellow signs, ubiquitous yellow signs in our community. And, I don't understand why, we would never spread poisons around the interior of our house. Of course, that's crazy. Yet, it's so common to spread poisons around the outside. Poisons which, the signs say, keep pets off, keep children off. Someone will have to explain that to me, but these are poisons and you need to recognize them as such and just avoid them. Next slide, please. Oh, yes. Any questions, by the way? Just
Small one.
Pardon?
I have a small one.
Yes.
I like. In the front, it only takes me 10 minutes to mow it, so it's, it's small.
Yeah.
Crabgrass Preventer, that's a barrier, right? Is that a poison or a barrier?
Crabgrass Preventer. I'm not familiar with that, but I can tell you, I'm not a lawn expert, and you look at my lawn and you say, you don't know anything about it. But I read that one way to inhibit crabgrass is to increase the height of the mower. The shade of the grass that's left behind will inhibit the crabgrass. If you cut it really close to the ground, more likely crabgrass is going to grow. So, like 2.5 to 3 inches height is what the height that you're looking to leave behind. If it's too low, if crabgrass is something you don't want, then cutting it too low is going to be, encouraging the crabgrass.
Can I just say that Amazon sells an amazing weeder for crabgrass that's actually fun to use. It's actually therapeutic to use.
You dig it up, and digs it up.
You can stand up and use it and push it in and you flip the.
Well, that's what I do with my crabgrass. I dig it up. But I do it for that.
Oh, this is fun. This is fun to use. You stand up. I think it's called Grandma's Weeder or something. But it's actually fun to use. It really is.
Give you
Yeah,
some
I'll
exercise.
send you the link to it.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. Now, here's a principle of nature. This is easy to understand. Everything goes somewhere. When we talked about our waste stream, when we throw things out, what do we mean out? This out goes somewhere. That garbage ends up somewhere. It ends up either being burned or in a landfill. Well, everything that we put on our properties that doesn't go into the soil, it ends up somewhere. If it lands on the sidewalk or on the driveway or on the road, and you see the pellets that are applied, you see them there. Well, it goes somewhere. Where does it go? When it rains, it's washed into the road these are called catch basins, you know them. It goes into the catch basin and disappears. Out of sight, out of mind. Well, no. In the catch basins, it goes down into a storm drainage system below the road. It's carried below the road and it's discharged into a low point on the landscape. Those most common low points are streams, rivers, lakes, and ponds, and eventually through the drainage system into the Long Island Sound. Everything we apply here as runoff is going to end up in the Long Island Sound. Next slide, please. So depending where it lands, it can really have ecological consequences. So for example, runoff, fertilizer runoff that ends up in a pond or a lake, if it's too much of it, it will result in an algal bloom, a lot of algae in the pond, which is unsightly. When that algae dies, sinks to the bottom of the pond, it's decomposed, that utilizes oxygen, so you have oxygen depletion and then fish can't live in there. When it happens in, try to get a window open. So when that happens in the Long Island Sound, believe it or not, I mean, there are large portions of the Long Island Sound that go that undergo hypoxia, which is very low oxygen levels, where nothing can live. And everything from, Connecticut drains down to the Sound. So whether it's a pond or the Long Island Sound, everything goes somewhere that runs off. And it's going to be a bad consequence. Slide, please. So fortunately, there are green alternatives. There's a different way of treating our properties. These are some signs that we put up on our property. We don't use any of those chemical treatments that I described, and there's a better way to do it. Next slide, please. So we talked earlier about compost. Rather than, I should have put a big red X through this, rather than using synthetic fertilizers, we could choose compost. The synthetic fertilizers, you can think of them as like giving the grass a sugar high. They'll really promote the growth of the stems of the grass at the expense of the roots. It's just not a healthy plant system. But compost, when applied, whether into a garden or even just as a top dressing on the lawn, will slowly release nutrients into the soil to be absorbed by the plant.
So you're saying the Miracle-Gro is feeding the plant?
Yes,
Not
it's feeding the plant,
root?
not the soil.
Not the soil.
And because it's released very quickly, you get a lot of growth of the plant leaves at the expense of the roots. So the plants become unbalanced. They're more prone to desiccation, to drying out. And after that quick release, now the plant has to live with an inadequate root system. But when the nutrients are slowly released through compost, that plant is going to be much more healthy. But not only that, we're going to be feeding the soil and not the plant, meaning the soil is alive with fungi, with bacteria, with worms, insects. And that compost is a food source for all of that. So when you have a healthy soil, now you can have healthy plants growing there. So choose compost, whether it's in your gardens or on your lawns.
It also helps with water retention,
Yes, thank you. The compost helps the soil to retain water. And as well, it gives the soil structure, which means it holds together as a unit. It's not subject to erosion. So yeah, and it just makes a really healthy soil, much more healthy than chemical alternatives.
How do you apply compost to a yard without smothering the grass?
Yeah, it would just be a very light top dressing, whether, if it's light compost and you can use kind of a fertilizer spreader or just kind of spreading by hand.
You can buy
fine.
it. You can buy compost.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You, if you subscribe to the Blue Earth,
No.
no? Anybody here subscribe to Blue Earth? Yeah, you can buy compost from them.
Yeah.
They sell it, but you can get leaf compost here in West Hartford at the town recycling center. Yeah, just fill up some buckets and you can get the leaf compost they offer that.
A friend of mine just told me this might be different when you're talking about the horse guard in Avon, or if you know the horse guard place,
Oh yeah.
gives away their horse manure for free. They do composted horse manure. Apparently you can go pick up for free. I haven't But,
As long as it's composted.
yeah,
then
it's
that should be
composted,
fine.
but it's
Yeah.
not fresh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Then you can spread it, your neighbors will love you.
So let's move on to plants. We need some weeds. Now, many people view the dandelion and the clover as weeds. But in fact, you may want to look at them differently. Dandelions are one of the first flowering plants to emerge in the spring. And in fact, just as I was walking into church today, right along by the portico, there were some dandelion weeds sticking up bright yellow flowers. Now we had planted daffodils, which were attractive, but we also had these dandelions. Bees don't go to daffodils, but they do go to dandelions. Lots of different pollinators will visit dandelion flowers. And clover, not only is it visited by pollinators, but clover is unique in that it takes nitrogen from the atmosphere, puts it into the soil. Nitrogen is a really important plant nutrient. It's a natural fertilizing agent. So if you have clover on your lawn, that's not a weed to get rid of. That's something to be appreciated. It's making your soil more
I'm
healthy.
feeling much better about my local. And I always feel.
Dandelions are edible.
I read a whole article, I think I might have said you were, they're using clover instead of grass in a lot of places.
Yeah, you can actually, you can put
They said clover,
clover seeds.
some of the countries, they're putting clover there instead of grass and some ferns.
So it doesn't grow as tall.
Yeah, I know
It
people
doesn't
that
much,
grow
but it
them.
doesn't.
It doesn't grow as
Grass
tall.
doesn't grow
That's
tall,
right.
That's
That's right. Linda Scacco shared with our Green Sanctuary team an article in the New York Times yesterday about communities in Wisconsin, which have now, they have what they call no mow May. In the month of May, these communities don't mow their lawns. And that's because, you have plants like dandelions, well, they're blooming now. So if you chop the flowers off, you're eliminating a pollinator source, a flower that pollinators would visit.
No
So-
mow May, huh?
No mow May. So you may want to think differently about what we call weeds, It's
The same thing, I mean, if people are still using pesticides, if they wait till after May, isn't that's an important time, right, that timeline? I mean, obviously the thing is not to use pesticides, but if you have people who are like die hard to do it, don't do it early in the season, right?
that's probably true. I wouldn't
I had
encourage
heard
any.
that was a really important thing to keep the bees alive, because otherwise you're killing off the bees.
That's why, and you can see this honeybee visiting this dandelion. So, yeah, I guess if you're going to use
Yeah, no, that
pesticides.
wouldn't be your choice. And
It wouldn't.
necessarily wouldn't be mine.
Would neighborhoods here allow you to allow your front lawn not to be mowed?
We have a
Your neighbors might not like.
We have a 1 foot ordinance in West Hartford. I looked it up after I saw the
Yeah.
article.
One
We have a
foot?
1 foot ordinance.
So
If
you
you
want
want
to
to
grass
be over a foot, you'll get fined.
Maybe the difference is between
I think the fine is $79.
A foot? Oh.
It might.
Yeah,
It's
it's
still here in April.
April, that's true. Yeah.
Right, I wonder if spring comes a little bit later to Wisconsin, so it doesn't have
I
the same
think
rainfall, of course.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Katie just pointed out that, spring here in Connecticut is different than spring in Wisconsin. It does come earlier here. Well, we saw, dandelions are already growing. So if you were to go out and cut them down now, yeah. I guess maybe just view dandelions and clover differently, Don't think of them something to yank out. If they're growing out of the sidewalk, and they do, dandelions are tough.
Be like a little kid, they pick them and give them to people.
Yeah.
I've seen some neighborhoods in other parts of the country around that have signs out there that says we're natural, and they, and they've let it grow. Because the neighbors are, but you have a signage saying, you're providing a natural habitat or something.
Education's important.
It's education,
Otherwise,
yeah.
people view it differently.
Mhm.
Next slide. So, hold your water. I tried to be catchy with my titles. How many of you have rain barrels on your property?
My son does.
Opportunity for growth. Okay, so rain barrels, as you may or may not know, are containers, different sizes. This is kind of a standard one. They collect water that comes off the roof gutter system from the downspout coming down the side of the house, and they intercept that runoff and they capture it during a storm event. We have one in our property. And then after the storm, you just flip the little lever, and ours is near a garden, and I just water the garden from the rainwater. Now, what that means is that that runoff is going to be more likely to be absorbed into the soil, not to run off the soil. And it means I have to use less water from my tap. But most importantly, it's reducing runoff, and it's increasing the amount of water that's going into the soil. So rain barrels are really a nice thing to have. Next slide. So let's talk about pollinators. This is
Question related to the rain barrel. My dehumidifier in the basement kind of serves as a rain barrel. What, if you could think of some ideas of what an easy way to get that used, or can you use that water?
So the dehumidifier, it's removing water from the air, right? And so how easy is it to, to carry that? Is that,
Not
Or
super easy.
or attach a hose to it.
Well, it would have to go upstairs,
yeah, the thing is,
So
gravity is your friend here, because gravity, literally, there's no pumping that's required. It's the hose comes out at the outlet hose is at the bottom of the rain barrel.
I always feel bad about dumping that water. It's like,
Yeah,
how strong am I feeling?
if you have house plants, you might try to maybe.
No. Okay, yeah, good.
I put those big 5-gallon buckets that, get, outside, and they'll fill up in a rainstorm.
Yeah, and then just empty it, you don't want mosquitoes to breed there. Right.
Put the lid on.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. I mean, that's your own 5-gallon rain barrel.
And you have one of them.
Yeah,
Like 20
yeah, that's great. That's a resource. It's a resource, not a waste product to just run off.
You could, just to mention, in Houston, everybody has rain barrels because you flood, and they're 50-gallon ones, and you have them on each of your. But we had workshops there at the green thing where you could have a workshop and order the barrels, and you can actually make them. It teaches you how to put the spout in, and then have the lid on it. And we went to this workshops, and everybody went home with a rain barrel, and because you can order the barrels cheap when you order 20 of them, and they're tubs, 50 gallons or 30 gallons.
Yeah.
So we could think about having that if
So
anybody
there's a
wanted to.
workshop for next year.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
if
Thank you very
anybody was
much.
interested, we could have a workshop and make them, make one. Yeah. Easy to make.
Okay, on to pollinators. This most of these pictures I'm going to show you of pollinators are from our gardens on our property that we've created. This is Eastern. I think this is drop dead gorgeous. Eastern swallowtail butterfly on a purple coneflower, just stunning. So let's talk about pollinators. So what is a pollinator? Well, here are examples. It's a butterfly moth. This is a cabbage butterfly. That's a wasp. Hummingbird. I didn't take that picture. They moved too fast. I didn't take that picture of that on cactus flower. But we do have, of course, ruby-throated hummingbirds that visit our flowers in Connecticut. And we do have native bats, of course, too. So all of these pollinators are here on the Connecticut landscape. And all but the bat visit our pollinator gardens right
So
here.
are these things you plant every year, or they mostly come back?
So these are, I'll talk about that in a second, but these are perennials. I believe, I'm a lazy gardener. I plant it once and let it come up and do its magic every spring. It's something to look forward to each spring. I'll talk about perennials in a second. I'm sorry, just a second. That. But what is a pollinator? A pollinator is any animal that carries pollen from one plant, the pollen from one plant, either to the same plant or to another plant. That allows for fertilization to occur. That allows for seeds and fruit to be produced. That's what pollinators are. And some pollinators, like bees, are actively there at visiting the flowers for the pollen. That's a food source from them. Many other pollinators are visiting the flowers because they are there for the nectar, which also is a food source for them. In the process, they bump up against the pollen, which is sticky. It sticks to their bodies, and as they go around from plant to plant, they accidentally, unintentionally transfer the pollen from one plant to another. Okay, so it's an amazing system. The plants have evolved to attract the pollinators through their colors and through their structures, and so the plants benefit from the pollinators benefit from the plants. Incredible system that you need to plug into. Next slide, please. So why are pollinators so important? Well, all of these fruits and vegetables, vegetables that you see here, they wouldn't be available to us without pollinators. All of them are produced as a result of pollinators. I read that 75% of all the flowering plants on the planet, about 180,000 different types, are pollinated by insects and animals. And it's $1 billion industry for agriculture. It's really, really important. Pollinators, without them, life would not be the same on planet Earth. Unfortunately, there are multiple threats to pollinators today. In the Midwest, the natural prairies with all of their pollen sources, they've been replaced largely fence to fence with corn and other crops. And suburban sprawl, of course, has altered the landscape as well. And then a class of insecticides known as neonicotinoid or neonics have been found to be very harmful to bees. They kill bees. So there's lots of threats. Pollinators really are threatened today. And so what can we do? What can we do to help them out? This is a great website, pollinator-pathways.org. It's a real, it's a source of a lot of different information, and including how to design pollinator gardens. I learned from this website that pollinator gardens that are within about 4/10 of a mile of other pollinator gardens or other pollen sources are ecologically connected. So if you and your neighbors create pollinator gardens within a 4/10 of a mile radius, the pollinators will visit, they'll travel, they'll move from that node to node to node. So you can think of your pollinator garden as part of a network, a pollinator network throughout, which might include, town parks, might include your neighbor across the street or several streets across. Yeah. Next slide, please. So when you create a pollinator garden, there are a number of different elements that you need to consider. You always want to, whenever possible, to use native plants because those will be most familiar to the native insects, native pollinators we have. You want to create a garden with seasonal blooms from spring all the way into fall. You want to consider whether it's a sunny or shady area that you want to create a garden in. That'll influence the type of plants that you put in. You want to think of the drainage. Is it very dry? Is it towards the wet side? That'll influence the plants you put in. Choose perennials rather than annuals. Not only is it easier, but in my experience, pollinators really don't visit the annuals. These are they've been hybridized for their color, but not for their attractiveness to pollinators. Put down mulch in order to retain moisture. So let's talk about some of these in a little detail. Let me throw in a plug for a great nursery. Have any of you been to Earth Tones Nursery in Woodbury?
Where?
Earth Tones Nursery in Woodbury.
Where's Woodbury?
Woodbury is over by Southbury, north of Waterbury. Earth Tones Nursery. I don't have any affiliation with them at all, but I do visit them each spring. They sell native plants which they've grown from seed that they've collected, and they literally just created this nursery within a wooded setting. So you have a lot of trees still up and around. You feel like you're walking through a woodland glade when you see the pots displayed. And so you get plants for all different sun and soil conditions. They're all natives. Really just worth the drive to go out there and check out earth tones where you can get your natives. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a seasonal flowering. So this is from the Northeast Pollinator.com. This is for Vermont, but it just gives you an idea from May all the way to September. You can, if you choose properly, you can have perennial flowers from spring into summer and into fall. And that's really important because you want your pollinator visitors to have food choices, pollen choices all seasons. And of course, you want to choose plants that are going to be attractive to pollinators. So for example, these are all from our gardens. Blue hyssop, solidago, goldenrod, purple coneflower. This is sweet pepper bush, cardinal flower, New England aster that grows in the fall. These are all native plants and they all attract, as you can see, they all attract pollinators. The hummingbirds love the bright red color of the cardinal flowers, for example. So choose plants that are pollinator friendly. And if you can, include larval host plants, that is, plants that are going to feed the larvae of, in this case, this is the monarch caterpillars. The native milkweed is the only plant that the monarch caterpillars eat. So if you want to attract and support monarchs, put in some milkweed, and if you're lucky enough, you'll get some monarch caterpillars on your property. Now, just a quick plug for the monarchs. Monarchs are amazing. Monarchs are the only insects that do a two-way migration the way that birds do. It's the only insect that does it. And it's not a short trip. Monarch that begins its life up in northern United States or Canada, and then makes the trip all the way down to the Sierra Madre Mountains of central Mexico. That's a 3,000-mile trip that insect is making. That's phenomenal.
How long do butterflies live?
So how long do they live? Great question. What you have to realize about monarchs is that they make the northern migration in generation stages. You can think of it as a relay race.
Okay.
If you start with the monarch population in central Mexico, it overwinters, millions and millions there. In March, they leave and start heading north. The first generation is comes from eggs that are laid in southern Texas, and those develop caterpillar adults, and they fly north. And then there's another generation further north, and another one. It takes, I read, 3 or 4 generations to hop their way up to the northern extent.
So what is their life like from one?
So that generation is short-lived. The ones that are making these hops. I can't recall off the top of my head. What I know for sure is that the generation that makes the southern trip, they live 8 to 9 months. That's long. The others are much shorter than that.
Why would
Is it
that
2 to
be?
3 months at most?
But why would they live longer coming down than, are they getting something inherited from the other ones?
Yeah, that's a great mystery. I don't have the answer to how are they able to survive that. They not only make the migration south, but then they have to survive in winter in central Mexico, where it still is cold. It's up in the mountains. So they have to make the bit of a northerly migration up into southern Texas. So that generation, that's really a tough generation to make that migration survive. And it kind of, when I thought about those multi-generations, I realized that the monarchs that were visiting our gardens in September, and they were really coming in large numbers. And if you have pollinator gardens, you see this. I realized those butterflies, they're going to be that's a generation that is going to be going all the way down here, and they need those food sources, the nectar they were getting from our pollinator plants, as well as all along that trip to make that trip. So we kind of have a special responsibility here. We've got to help get those butterflies all the way down south and get them started on the migration. It just gives me chills to think about monarchs and what they do.
And they know, like inherently, when they're hatched or
They-
whatever, to go in that certain direction.
They navigate. It's not known entirely how through through sunlight, the angle of the sun, but they've been doing this for millions of years, and it's genetics. It's incredible. There is a migration that occurs out in western United States, but
My
that's
son lives out west. He lives a little north of Santa Barbara, in a town called Goleta. Have you heard of it?
no.
I have.
And the monarchs, they come back every year to this same place in Goleta in March. And I was there, and it's unbelievable. I mean, they're just like covering the trees and they're flying all around. It was just amazing. And they come back to that same place.
That's the way our yards are in Houston. They put milkweed out and you go pick it up and they run out of it. But so everybody picks it up and you put it in your yard and it is filled with the caterpillars are all over the place. And then they bloom and move on. And it's in this April, March or April.
Yeah.
They're coming up from Mexico and it's right on the path. And so all the nurseries, everybody puts it out and you can go get the milkweed and because that's what they eat.
That's right. That's the only plant.
That's the only
that
plant they eat,
caterpillars
so-
eat.
You just fill your yard with it and it's just like,
So you see, it's those communities down in South Texas, that are helping the monarchs down at that part of their migration. It's communities up here, that are helping the monarchs that are going to be making the migration south, but communities all along the way. So we're kind of replacing those big prairies that are no longer prairies. They're corn. They've been planted corn, but people who care are sort of stepping in and helping the monarchs make this incredible migration. So, okay, here's something else that you should think about with your pollinator garden. This is this garden at the back of our house. My wife refers to as my mess, and I am very proud of my mess. It's a mess because I leave it up all winter. I don't cut these plants down. I weed whack them. I did that last week. I leave it up all winter. Why? Am I lazy? I told you I am lazy, but it's more than that. These dead plants are used, well, the coneflowers, for example, in the fall, the goldfinches love the seeds, so they feed on the seeds. And then all winter long, the birds who come to visit our feeders, they love ducking underneath all of this cover, and they find seeds from the plants that have fallen down. So we have a steady stream all winter long of birds that come and continue to feed. So don't cut down your dead plants until the springtime. They'll function well.
Insect larva, not the larva, the Christmas, right? They overwinter if you cut it all down and you lose your larvae.
That's right.
This was from the year before.
That's
Praying mantis, right? So praying mantis will eat that little like
those
egg exact thing.
little cocoons. Yeah,
So yeah, I have a nest.
fantastic. Oh, that's good. I call this fringe benefits. Every year, every summer, I'm amazed at what shows up on our screen doors. Like, this moth that looks like it's, it came off a bark of a tree, or, beautiful moth, praying mantis that's just up there, these giant beetles. And this, just one day, all of these, there were about 100 of these bright orange little bugs that showed up on one of our plants. And I figured out that it's a giant milkweed bug. They all just showed up there. And you just get amazed. You just walk into your garden and you just get amazed at what all of a sudden just showed up. These are fringe benefits. So these are our pollinator gardens. We have a very small property in West Hartford. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 all together along the side of our property, the front, side, and my mess in the backyard. But you don't need a lot of space. You know, even if you just plant a few containers with pollinator-friendly plants, that's fine. Do whatever you can. And what I've given here is, these are the plants that you could find in our gardens. We have a few from the spring, lots in the summer, some go summer into fall. And these are more summer into fall. Most of these are native, some of them are not. I include them like bee balm just because it's such a magnet for bees. I showed you wasps before. I've never been stung by wasps and bees in the years we've had these. I'm in there, you know, deadheading, and they just seem to know that they leave me alone. So if you're worried about these things,
He's our friend.
yeah. So, any questions before I turn over to Diane?
Can you find, do they have gardeners that will help you make a pollinator garden in your house? At your house?
I'm sure, yeah, landscaping companies offer that. Private landscapers, yeah, I'm sure you would. You have to tell them what you're looking for and ask them to install a pollinator garden.
Probably natural garden, you know, people that do natural gardening. I've seen some ads for people that can help you with, I would think.
Yeah, maybe something more than a big commercial
Yeah,
operation.
right.
That are familiar with the pollinator plants and the needs of it.
Just start small. I love herbs, there's lots of herbs that attract pollinators, and then you get the herbs as well. So
Fringe
you're like
benefits.
sharing the plants, plant dill and thyme and there's so many herbs that the pollinators love. And if you just leave a few flowers for them,
I have that a block when it comes to like what to put where in the house.
nice thing with gardens is you get to start over every year too. So if you plant something that doesn't work, you try something different.
Yeah, there's do-overs every year. You have a chance for a do-over.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Okay,
Diane?
I'm gonna slip through my path.
Would you be able to share this PowerPoint with us?
It's,
Yes, if you,
On
yeah,
YouTube?
we can pass around, I can email the PowerPoint to people if we pass around.
I would
Look
love
names
that.
on it, and I'll just email it to
There's a
you.
lot of
Ideally, like all of our PowerPoints will be eventually shared via the website when we get our new website
Oh,
person, higher than church. So we're waiting for that to happen, but happy to email.
hopefully soon.
Oh, we don't have a website?
We have a website person, but not someone who's able to do sort of the day-to-day committee.
If we email you, would that be easier than you can just send?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind. That's fine.
Yeah, I included the website names with the idea that this would be
Yeah, I
publicly
like
available.
those charts you had of all your plants.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
I like that.
Yeah, you know that this works here in our area. These
I thought
plants
this was
work.
recorded and they could see this.
Right.
I'll also.
Yeah,
If
if it's
so
on
just
YouTube.
because,
isn't it?
so I don't miss a bunch of emails coming in from different people, maybe we can just do it all in one shot. If we can't pass around, give a scrap sheet of paper. And,
Yeah, you just
and
put your name.
if you put down your email rather than me getting 10 different emails.
That'd be-
Here you go. You can just enter your name and your email.
I'll buzz through this real quickly and maybe just skip part of it because it's, that was so interesting. We could have done that. I came in with the Pollinator Gardens make a perfect healing garden. It has all the elements of a healing garden. It has the smells, it has the touch, it has the color, it has the sounds, and everything that would cause you to have a healing garden. What you have to add to it is easy to turn your garden into a therapeutic or healing. I don't like to use the word healing, but that's what everybody uses because when I was designing for the medical.
Don't you do this as a
Yeah, I
career?
did as a career, but what, you know, when you're in the medical field, they say you're not healing, you know, they have a little stigma with that usually. So I say therapeutic gardens. And the books are always called therapeutic. They don't want to say healing, but I think it is actually healing myself. But so what you have is a few elements that you need to think about. Next slide. And heal the body and not only the earth. Is that our family unit has changed a lot. And family unit, oh yeah, you went back one. The family unit right now has all diverse people living in it. This is because the people live longer with ailments. People don't go to institutions anymore. So your home has it's becoming becoming a haven for multi-generation healing. So people come home from the hospital with the same thing they went in with, but your homes aren't usually designed to handle that. And a garden is key to having people be independent and feel energized and good. So we have all of these things that depression and everything else that we're living with. I think I've almost skipped this. Canada has just passed a new law where doctors can, it's called PARX, P-A-R-X, and it's a prescription for nature, and they can now give a prescription that's covered by insurance to go to a park, national park. It's an admission, and so it's called Take Two Deep Breaths and Call Me in the Morning. And so they want you to go out into nature because they know that that's what's going to help you, especially with people with a lot of emotional and stress. So Canada passed that last year, 2019, and it's going across. So there's that. And then this guy, I'm just going to skip that. We did a study, so there's now evidence. There's never been evidence that nature heals. Everybody knew it did, but there was no scientific background. And Dr. Ulrich, back in the early 90s and the 80s, he did intensive studies where he actually put patients in the hospital, followed them with a view of the garden, with no view, and they absolutely proved without a doubt that nature heals. And so it caused the requirements for hospitals to all have windows. You can't, it's changed the code. I think I'll skip this one because I don't think we're going to have time to go. Let's go to the one with we'll go back to here. I'm going to do a memory garden. Meet Mia. I've done this series where we took people. Meet Mia is a case study for people that are getting dementia, and they're at home. And so it's a wandering or memory garden for dementia. And a pollinator garden is key to that. So what you do is, all you need to do to make it is to create, you have to remember that people with dementia, what you do is you want to create a healing garden is look at your purpose, the purpose of the garden. The purpose for Mia is they wanted her to be able to go out into the garden and to be able to touch the flowers and be able to be safe out there. And the way you do that is you make a safe path. So when you have the garden, key number one is a safe path. And as dementia gets worse, you make sure it's circular, so you always come back to where you started. You don't go out there and get lost. You know, you always come back to, so you can make a circle 8, you can make a whatever, but when you leave, you can wander around and come back. And the sense of entry, which is nice for any garden, actually, is when you have a sense that you've entered a space. That gives you a sense that you're into something special. So if you put an arch, you see a lot of gardens with little arches as you go in. If you're going to enter from your house, if you're doing somebody that's starting to get dementia or something, you'll have the exit from your house, and you'll probably want an entry right there from the exit. Create some kind of up here where it's colder and you want to use it for longer months, you might consider creating a little alcove or something that's heated or something, so that you can stand out there in the winter and still, but it's an entry to your garden. Any window in a house almost can be made into a door. There's no support. So if you have a room or a bedroom where someone with dementia is living, you can change that window into a door and go right out into the garden and come back in. And so it allows them to have another room, a room with a view, I call it. And you want a sense of destination, because as you're wandering around, you always want to have some place you're going, like a place to plant, a place where there's a fountain, a place, and we'll go on with that. And then use all your senses. Make sure that you can touch the plants and not where it's on the path, where it's not thorns. Everything's safe. You can eat it, nothing poison. So you, along the path, now back what you do off the path, doesn't matter, but on the path, you make sure you can walk along and that you can touch, you can smell, you can feel. You raise up some areas so that you can actually touch the soil and plant. so that someone can go out there and have a little spot. Okay, move on. So the paths create an interesting journey. So you make sure your path is, you make some kind of path that is smooth. So when you have a walker or a cane or something, and that you have sturdy benches that you can really lean on along the way, or some kind of seating, and create an interesting and secure journey that's through the garden. And it can be a portion of the garden. You don't have to use the whole garden. You can use a little portion of it. When when I'm saying you don't need a big space for this, but just as long as you can get out into the garden and back to where you started, you can create a space. And then you have to, as people get, if you're doing this for children with autism or something, same thing. You don't want them to wander, so you would create a little sense of a surround where you don't wander off. And we'll show you how to do that. You have little alcoves up there with the stuff planted up high. Whole garden doesn't have to be like that, but you can do some, so the wheelchair can move right on up there. You can create walls like here, where it's up and down, and that creates a surround. So you can come along here and just put a little place in your garden that has a surround, and that way you can walk up and touch everything. Probably brings the pollinators in too. You know, you just use the vertical. Make sure you go up in some areas so that people can have it at their eye level. You can create a destination like down here where there's a circular thing. You get to the end and you turn around and come back, but you have a destination where you can meet down there with your family or friends, or just by yourself there, but you have a destination. And that wall over there, a memory, as for dementia, it's really nice to put memories out there. Put memories in your garden, things that remind people of something, pieces of furniture they had, old bird feeders, or you can make a wall. This happens to be, you can put things on the wall or something that reminds people of things, and it makes them feel very calm and happy to be out there with the memory garden. Exercise, they have these things now, senior gardens. And the senior gardens, you think, oh, it's too cold up here, we can't do that better, but that's not really true, because I was in Switzerland last year and they had these all over the place and it snows, but they've started to do it where maybe you put a piece of exercise equipment out there where you can go exercise, or at least you get out there and you're in nature and you feel like you might want to do it, and they have equipment that's made for outdoors. So exercise is a really nice destination point, or never more than one destination point. Singing there, I had a music garden, and I do now, where I have you go out there, and it's really a wonderful place to go if you play an instrument, or if you want to sing or something. Like she's got a book there singing, and you have a fountain there. But I had a big thing made where you put your music, I'm trying to say, music stand. Yeah, I had one, a friend of mine made me one, and it's out there in my garden. Yeah, it's sitting in the garden, and we've got the benches around the fire pit. So people come over and bring their guitar and sing. My grandson plays out there and sings, and go out there, it's a music garden. And my garden's not that nice, but I'm making it nicer, but Ed's been helping me a lot with this. But having a place for music is very nice in the garden, and you might not think of it. You might think, but if it's set up and people come over, well, bring your guitar, let's go out there and play, So you have a music place. Okay, so, and then a meditation place in the garden. Really, when you see a meditation garden, you kind of already know. I was in Washington, D.C. walking down, and it was a big garden, and I walked in, and then all of a sudden I went around a corner and I saw a bench on the busy street, but it was inside of a garden. And when I went around this corner, it was a garden you could walk through. It was hidden, but there was a bench there with a little fountain. I knew exactly what it was. It's a meditation garden. It's where you're kind of secluded. You've got a surround, and you can put one of those in. And a nice little fountain's always nice to have. Okay. Then a potting place sometimes, if you'll raise it up and have a little place where anybody that's elderly or with dementia, they not get down. So if you make the potting place accessible, you encourage it more to go out there and let's go out and plant something, put it in there, you can reach it. And you can see along the path there where she's touching everything, the sturdy furniture, see over there, and you sit down and you won't tip over when you try to stand up, or you have arms on it. Just a couple of chairs like that, or benches where you're really safe to walk along the garden path and sit. A place to just listen and smell and be one with nature there, just getting out. Okay, next. And then when you can't go out anymore, when people get to the stage that they cannot wander, cannot go out anymore, what we do is, there's the garden, is you cut the door in from the window and you just make a little room out in the garden so that you can go out and sit in the garden and come back in, even though you can't walk it anymore. But it's a place to go out and be one with the garden. So if you can create it, if you're trying to do it for someone you can create one of those places out in the garden anywhere, but if you can't walk to it, you make it off of the room of your house. It's just an additional room. But, and according to how much money you have, it can just be a covered area and you can't use it all year round, put some heaters around, or it could be enclosed where you could open it up, but it causes you to be able to go out into the garden. So this is the end. Basically, the elements of a healing garden are simple. You analyze the goals. What is it? Because everybody's different. If it's for yourself, or somebody that's lost their sight, or somebody that can't walk anymore or something, you analyze what your goals are in that garden. And that's the fun part. You say, what do I really want to happen? You create a sense of entry. You have destination points so that somebody is going somewhere, and it causes them to want to go out and go there. You create interaction with all your senses, provide safe walking paths, have an area of rest, create a sense of surround. That's a little small one. Also, how you could do it in a little small area right off of there. And then for dimension, have no decision points. Don't ever come to a place where you have to decide and then you go down to a dead end. If someone's with dementia that's really on, they get to a dead end and they're stuck. They're just stuck. So just make it where it keeps going back to where you started. I always come back to the song you were singing. And so I was, what you can now, I'll wrap this up. This is the summation of how to do it. The first garden I did was one that I had done with my brother, but so if you get this PowerPoint, you can kind of look at it. We won't go through it, but you can do that with any ailment that anybody has in your house. Autistic children, you can make gardens for them that have interactive things to do and to calm down and stuff within the garden. But the purpose is the main goal is to enhance life through interaction with nature. Get them out of the house and into nature. And there's the last one is just 2 books. These 2 books here. If you happen to be extremely interested in therapeutic gardens, this is Dr. Wagenfield. She and I did a lot of lectures together, but she's a physical therapist up at Boston University, but she takes gardens for different children with cancer, PTSD. She created a garden and she tells you all the things that she thought about to create that garden. This is only if you want to deep dive into something. As for that, this one, Open Spaces, Sacred Places. This book is out of print right now, but you can still get it real cheap online. But this book is just wonderful for people who are like the Unitarian Church, who want to do stuff in the community. This is an organization that gave $100,000 things to make gardens every year. They did it for like 12 years. And I always had my students compete for it just because it was an exercise. We never won because we didn't have the ideas weren't good enough to win. But these are winners in here. But what they've done now is called Nature Sacred. And they're up in the Northeast here is where they're located. And they said they really would like projects in Connecticut. But what they do is, it's a nonprofit, but Nature Sacred, they provide funding, help you get funding or put funding together to do things. I wrote them and said, we might want to be doing something here in Hartford, and he said, oh yeah, let them know. But they have wonderful different ideas. So this book, I just think it's really fascinating what people have come up to do. And it's an easy book, but you can get it for $3 or $4 online. But anyway, Connie.
Thank you.